Welcome to another video. This is going to be the best wildcard team for game week 10, and I'm also going to be showing you some alternative picks that you might not have considered or that have been kind of slipping under the radar. So without further ado, let's head straight into the video. So on screen you see my team selection at the moment. If you haven't already, check out that video where I break down the transfers I've made and also some of the other key decisions and also future transfer plans. But let's actually now show you the best wildcard team you can make for game week 10. And a lot of it has stayed the same, I'd say, from the previous videos, but there are a few components that have changed. But some players, in my opinion, are kind of non-negotiables and you should just go with them, with Salah being the obvious example. Now in goal, I've always talked about this from, I'd say, game week 7. Raya and Ramsdale are the two best goalkeepers you can get, at least in terms of value, and you could even arguably have both of them and then rotate between the tough fixtures for Brentford and Arsenal respectively. So I think you could, if you have the money and you're happy with the rest of your squad, you could have both Raya and Ramsdale, but otherwise just go with Foster as your second goalkeeper and pick between Raya and Ramsdale. Who would I go for? If I had to pick one, I'd still just go for Ramsdale, and the reason why is because even if Arsenal don't keep a clean sheet, and I still think they'll keep more than Brentford this season, I think Ramsdale will just pick up more points from saves and also bonus, considering, or at least kind of assuming, that Ramsdale will continue to start over Leno, which he should, by the way. His distribution is very good, very important to Arsenal's build-up, and also just the presence he has at the back. So I would personally prefer Ramsdale, but Raya is still a really good pick, and there's no right or wrong here. Just at this current moment in time, I'd go for Ramsdale, and that's what I went for on my Game Week 8 wildcard, but both are really good, and you can't really go wrong. I'll be showing you some goalkeepers, and same with alternative picks, like I said before, later on in this video. And then in the defence, Ben Chilwell's an interesting one. Now, I just think if you have enough defensive depth and you have a really good squad overall, I think you can afford to have someone like Chilwell or Reece James, who just offers that sheer attacking threat and also assist potential. So I think Chilwell is probably the best defender you can own at the moment, but long term, I'd still say Azpilicueta, maybe Rudiger, Diaz and Cancelo. They might all be more reliable picks, but for the time being, Chilwell's just in amazing form, and just the positions he's occupying, he's basically playing as a left winger at the moment, so I would go for him on a wild card. And I have made a transfer for the English left back. And then Trent Alexander-Arnold, another one. He showed against Manchester United a 10-point haul, and he can just get that amount of points against any team. So Trent, I would still go for him. I know some people would just think, well, maybe just go for double City and double Chelsea defence. I completely understand that, but I still think Liverpool are one of the best defensive teams in the world. And also, just in general, Trent's attacking potential is even better than Chilwell's, and Trent can get 10 to 15 assists easily. Maybe not this season, but just enough, I think, to outscore pretty much anyone around that price in any position, including the midfielders. So Trent, for me, just covering Liverpool in the defence and also just getting those assists, bonus points as well. Trent is still up there this season for bonus points, so I just go for him. And then Cancelo, at this moment in time, I'd go for him over Diaz because Cancelo is nailed. Diaz obviously is too, but because Cancelo's nailed and has that attacking threat, I'd just put him over Diaz. But if Zinchenko starts to win a bit of favour with Pep Guardiola once again like he did last season, then that could spell trouble for Cancelo, who could actually have his minutes eaten up by the Ukrainian, and the same goes with Kyle Walker as the right back. So Cancelo's very versatile. He's one of the best players in the world, both at left back and right back. But I'd be a bit cautious maybe in a few game weeks' time. The situation could change, but for the time being, I think Cancelo is just a must-have. And then we have Antonio Rudiger. Now, once again, it's kind of this kind of long-winded debate between double Chelsea defence and double City. This is completely up to you, Rudiger or Diaz, and also how much money you have. Rudiger's a bit cheaper. Chelsea have better fixtures, at least for the next few game weeks, but I still think City long-term have the better fixtures. So I would still arguably go for Diaz over Rudiger, but I do actually like the attacking threat Rudiger has, both in terms of assists from knock-ons and headers, and also the amount of goals he can score. I think he can get 3 to 5 goals this season, and he always seems to score against Leicester, by the way, so just keep that in mind. But I think Rudiger or Diaz, it's up to you what you want to go for. I'd personally be considering Diaz over Rudiger, but it's kind of 50-50. And you can always go for Reece James, for example, but I think Chilwell's already enough, and then you can just have that nailed Chelsea defender. And don't forget about Azpilicueta, by the way. He's still a really good option. He's probably going to be playing in game week 10, so don't be put off by him being benched in game week 9. And then as your budget defender, he has proven that he is the best at the moment in his class. It's Livramento. He's got that attacking threat, and he's actually only blanked once, I think, in his last 5 games, whether he's getting clean sheets, assists, or goals. So Livramento's been very promising, very, very consistent, and for his price, you can't ask for much more, especially now with Shane Duffy. He could potentially have lost his place. He was benched against Manchester City in game week 9, so let's wait and see there. But at the moment, Livramento is definitely the best. He's also got the fixtures and the means to continue this, so Livramento is definitely, I'd say, my 5th defender of choice. Now we look at the midfield, and I have to say it's very solid. So ignore Douglas Luiz. Once again, I always say this, don't overcomplicate the 4.4 to 4.6 million bracket. Just go for one and stick to them. So Brownhill, Douglas Luiz, Allen, maybe Ramsey, who I actually mentioned a few game weeks ago, and he scored a really good goal against Arsenal, by the way. Probably not the most nailed of the 4, but Ramsey is probably the most attacking, I'd say, and they're all good options in their own right, but don't overcomplicate it. Just pick one and stick to it. And now we are getting right down to the nitty-gritty. That midfield is looking really good. So Heung-min Son, yes, Spurs are very unreliable, very inconsistent, but Son isn't. He's a very consistent player, one of the best players in the world and in the Premier League, a really good finisher, and he's only blanked a few times this season despite Spurs' I'd say struggles offensively. So Heung-min Son, I definitely recommend him on a wildcard because you're also looking at the long term. Yes, he does face Manchester United soon, but then again, is that really a tough fixture, especially for Heung-min Son, who got a really big haul last season at Old Trafford? I don't think so. And even then, if he does blank, he's just got really good fixtures, and he's the main man at the moment at Spurs. Harry Kane just doesn't seem to be on it, and I'd rather have Heung-min Son over Harry Kane, just for that extra value, and also the extra point as a midfielder for scoring a goal, and also a clean sheet. So Heung-min Son is a no-brainer, and speaking of no-brainers, we have Mohamed Salah, the best player in the world at the moment on current form, for sure, no one can deny that, and a hat-trick at Old Trafford, the first player to do that in the Premier League. Absolutely unbelievable, and he got an assist. So Salah, absolutely unbelievable, and just go for him, don't overcomplicate it. And the same goes for the captaincy, even, you could say, at the moment. And then Phil Foden, a bit fortunate, I'd say, with the goals, but he could have actually scored even more. So despite the fortunes with the actual goals he scored, arguably could have got even more points. So 18, I'd say, is quite justifiable, and Foden is my City attacker of choice. Kevin De Bruyne is just too expensive and he can be benched just like Foden, but with Foden only being 8 million or so, I'd rather go for him in the midfield. And because of the squad depth you'd have with this squad, even if Chilwell or Foden are occasionally benched, you can cover for it with your bench options like Livramento, for example, and Hwang up front. And then we've got Mason Mount. No one really thought about him, I'd say, before game week 9 against Norwich. And let me just make this very clear. I don't think he's going to get 24 points or hat-tricks very often. He's not that sort of player. He tends to be the one who kind of ticks over. And when Lukaku and Werner come back, I think he'll not only be in and out of the side, but he'll also, I'd say, be a bit limited in terms of the attacking threat he can possess, both in terms of goals and assists, because he's not going to be playing offensively as part of that front three that often, which he did against Norwich. And he was a bit fortunate, I'd say, with the returns, because obviously the penalty was retaken, and then he got a tap-in against 10-man Norwich. Of course, a tap-in's a goal. Points are points. No one's going to deny that, and Mount was a really good choice for any of you who have him. But my point is that he's really good for the next few fixtures, and even long-term arguably, but don't just be kind of bought into this 24-point margin or 24-point haul. He's not going to do that every week. So if you keep your, I'd say, expectations realistic, I think you'll be very impressed by Mason Mount. And you can still go for Kai Havertz. I'll be talking about alternatives later on, but Mason Mount is still a good choice. Just be a bit more realistic when it comes to the expectations. And then finally, we have the front three. I'll be honest, on a wild card, you could potentially just think, well, I want to have a premium striker just in case, because when Lukaku's back, when Ronaldo's in form, especially if United get a new manager, and also Harry Kane, if he gets into a bit of form, and also Jamie Vardy, is he going to actually, let's say, get fit ahead of game week 10? And of course, he's a really good option too. So you could actually save a spot for a 10 million forward or more, but unfortunately that would require maybe downgrading one of your midfielders like Mason Mount, maybe to a budget option, or Heung-min Son to a £5 or £6 million player. Obviously it depends on your budget as well, but I think these three strikers are offering the best value at this moment in time. We've got Ivan Toney. Yes, he's been blanking a lot, but his performance against Leicester was really good, and arguably he wasn't offside, to be honest, and he had plenty of chances. He even created one for Mbumo. So Ivan Toney, I think, is a really good choice, especially with those fixtures for Brentford, and I'm very impressed by the Bees offensively, so I would definitely recommend Ivan Toney. I've been banging on about him for weeks now, and I think he'll finally come good. Hopefully, I haven't jinxed him there. And then we've got Hwang Hee-chan, and him and Jimenez have a very good connection at the moment. What I would say about Hwang is also be realistic with him, because he's actually had 4 shots this season, I believe, on target, and he scored pretty much every single one, and overall he's had 7 shots. What that shows is that, like his compatriot Heung-min Son, he's very, very clinical, but that doesn't mean he's going to be keeping up these underlying stats and also output very often. So be a bit realistic there. But for 5.6, 5.7 million, I think he offers exceptional value. There's also Brocha around that 5 million price bracket, who is just looking really good at the moment, but he does have an ankle injury. He might be out for Game Week 10. So let's keep an eye on that situation too. And then we have Mikel Antonio, who is just ticking over very nicely. And the reason why I'd probably want to keep him is that, yes, he's got some very tough fixtures coming up. Aston Villa away isn't too bad, but then Liverpool at home, not the easiest. But then you look at West Ham's fixtures from around Game Week 16 onwards. They're absolutely sensational. So if you do get rid of Antonio now, you're probably going to be getting him back in, assuming he's fit and available and all of that, ahead of Game Week 16. And I just think just get him in now and don't worry about it too much. I was actually considering potentially downgrading Antonio to then fund a move for Son in the midfield, but ultimately I'm not too sure about that move now, and I might just move Foden on to Son in a few game weeks time. So that's kind of my own insight into my own transfer plans. But with Antonio, I think just keep it simple. He's still the best in class around this price bracket, so just stick to him. And if you do want a premium striker, unfortunately it would require downgrade with either Mason Mount, Heung-min Son, or one of your defenders. Take your pick there. This is just a good example of a team you can make that can actually boost you up the ranks and that could put you ahead of the curve, and targeting those fixtures and also good form of certain players, especially with the circumstances. For example, Vernon Lukaku being out and Mason Mount being very offensive for Chelsea. So that's the best wildcard team. Let me know what you think and what you would change. And remember to like the video if you found this useful or entertaining. And I'm actually going to be showing you now some alternative picks that you can go for. So yes, I wouldn't go for 2 premium goalkeepers, of course. I don't even think I'd go for 1 premium goalkeeper. But if you're looking for someone like that, Martinez and Mendy, 2 of the best goalkeepers in the world, and 2 of the keepers who kept the most clean sheets last season, I would definitely recommend them if you're looking for a premium goalkeeper at the moment. Mendy is actually getting more save points this season than he was in the last campaign, and Martinez can still get 10 points even when he concedes 3 goals, which is absolutely bizarre. But Martinez is the best penalty saver right now in the world. He's such a good goalkeeper, and even if he has a bit of a howler like he did against Arsenal, he can still get the points for you. So if you're looking for someone a bit more expensive in goal, then go for Martinez or Mendy, who can actually be really good as your 3rd Chelsea player. Although maybe just think about that. If you do get Mendy, it does block a move potentially to Reece James, Ben Chilwell, Rudiger, Azpilicueta, Lukaku in the future, Mason Mount, Havertz, etc. We know the amount of options that Chelsea pose and possess. And then we have the defenders, of course. And by the way, obviously, this is not, let's say, an alternative 11 for the best wildcard team. These are just alternative players. As you can see, we've got plenty of Chelsea players more than you are allowed to have. But Azpilicueta is still a really good option, like I said before. He's going to play in Game Week 10, so don't be in a rush to get him out. And I'm saying that, and I literally just got him out for Ben Chilwell, but that was to fund the move from Saka to Foden, just to make that very clear. I still have faith in Azpilicueta, and I think he's the nailed, or the second most nailed Chelsea defender. And then we have a Brentford defender as well. So we've got Henry here, and you could go for Janssen or Pinnock if he's fit, but I think Henry looked very offensive against Leicester, and he was very impressive, and I think if he can keep that up, he could offer the best value of the Brentford defence. And then we have Reece James, who very good performance against Norwich, and he shows what he can do very consistently, I'd say, against Arsenal, an 18-pointer. The problem with him, I'd say, is that there are certain times where he's going to get those 1-pointers off the bench, and also it's just very frustrating sometimes for Reece James. He doesn't start sometimes and doesn't even come on, and obviously he offers so much potential. Maybe consistency was the wrong word used earlier. I think he's probably not the most consistent Chelsea defender. Azpilicueta, Rudiger, Chilwell when he starts, I think they all offer more consistency, and I just think that's a big issue, the fact that he comes off the bench for those 1-pointers. But if you can stomach that, then when he does start, he can be one of the best differentials and just a really good choice overall. So I'd recommend him, I'd recommend considering him, but just be wary. Those 1-pointers can be a killer. And then we have Ruben Dias, who is just steady and consistent. Recently, he hasn't been doing the goods ever since I got him in, unfortunately, but he is capable of some big hauls. He can get those bonus points, occasionally get a goal or an assist, but with him, you're mainly getting those clean sheets and maybe the odd bonus or two. And he's just so reliable and consistent, just like City's defence. And then we have Ben White. So if you don't have Ramsdale in goal, you can cover that with Ben White. And also, in Tierney's absence, consider Nuno Tavares, who is 4.3 million. He was really good against Aston Villa, bombed forward, and he has a bit of attacking threat. Even in pre-season, he was scoring a few goals. So consider him if Tierney is out for a lengthy period of time. And there's also Tomiyasu, but honestly, I would rather have Ben White because he's more likely to get bonus points, at least from what we've seen so far. I might change my mind on that. And then looking at the midfield, I still have Kai Havertz in there, despite his very, very disappointing Game Week 9 score. But still, I think facing Newcastle next, some pretty good fixtures coming up for Chelsea, despite obviously a bit of a fixture swing soon. I think Havertz can be really good in the absence of Werner and Lukaku. But to be honest, in terms of the eye test and in terms of what we've seen, in terms of the stats, there's not much to indicate that he will just suddenly boom into form or blossom into form. But still, I think Havertz is a good option. If you got him in, don't get rid of him now. Give him a bit of time to prove himself. And around the £5 million price bracket, I think Kovacic is the best. There is Smith Rowe for a bit more if you can afford him. And of course, Mbeumo, who's in this team as well, or at least in these alternative picks. And there's also, for example, Townsend, still a decent option on paper, Damari Gray. But Kovacic, for that lower echelon of 5.2 million midfielders, he is looking really good at the moment. I'm still not convinced he's going to sustain these numbers, but for the time being, he's doing the business. And for someone so cheap, you could actually start him in a lot of these good fixtures for Chelsea, including Newcastle coming up. So why not? I'd still be a bit more inclined to go for Havertz or Mason Mount in particular, but still Kovacic isn't the worst pick in the world. And then we have Bernardo Silva, another one who is a quality player in real life, at the moment one of the best in the league, but from an FPL perspective, not really the most reliable in terms of goals and assists. But this season, he has actually been picking it up, and he's a very important part of City's midfield. And if City do win the league, I think it will be in large part due to Bernardo Silva. So keep an eye on him, of course. There is De Bruyne if you are willing to spend more money, but I just think with the occasional benchings for the Belgian and his injury record, I would just go elsewhere. And then we have Mbeumo. He is an injury doubt at the moment. He is missing out for the Carabao Cup midweek, but the good news with him is that there is a chance he will make it for Game Week 10, but we just don't know anything at the moment. Let's wait and see if there's any news before the deadline. And then we have Yuri Tielemans. Now, a bit of a kind of common theme with these midfielders is that their source of points, I'd say, is a bit unsustainable, or at least they're players who haven't really proven themselves to be reliable FPL assets. And Yuri Tielemans this season has been Leicester's best player, and a lot of them are long shots, absolute rockets going into the top corner. That goal against Brentford was absolutely sensational, but still a really good player, and he can keep this up. And even in seasons gone by, he has occasionally gotten a few assists here and there and shown a bit of consistency. And he is at a very cheap price, so he is just yet another option to consider. And of course, he is going under the radar, but with the more goals he's going to get, more and more people are going to jump on him. I'm still not completely convinced, but Yuri Tielemans as a player, of course, probably going to be snapped up by a really big club next year. And he's just a quality player, so definitely consider him, or at least have him on your watch list or in your thoughts. And then we're looking at the forwards. So, of course, there is Gabriel Jesus. He has been very impressive. A lot of assists, not too many goals, but the Brazilian has been very important to Manchester City as well. And we have Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang at the moment, and his record at the Emirates is very impressive right now. And I think he's scored in 4 consecutive games there, and he does face Watford very soon. And Arsenal's fixtures aren't the greatest in the upcoming, let's say, 5 game weeks, but still, Aubameyang can be a really good differential. And if you need a replacement for Vardy, for example, if he's out, I think Aubameyang could be it. And then speaking of Jamie Vardy, I still think he's the best premium striker at the moment. Of course, Ronaldo could change things when United have that fixture run from Game Week 15 onwards. But Jamie Vardy is looking like the best. Hopefully he is back fit in time for Game Week 10. Otherwise, I'm probably in the mud. But yeah, he's obviously been really good this season too. And he's not really aging, let's say. He's aging like a fine wine, if anything, the 34-year-old. And then we've got Callum Wilson. What a goal that was against Crystal Palace. I mean, Wilson's such a good finisher, and he's Newcastle's best player, the most important player, of course, as well. And Newcastle need him fit to stay in the division and then push on when, obviously, the new owners can then flex their muscles. But Callum Wilson is just such a good player, and unfortunately, he is injury prone. But still, I think if he can stay fit, he can be the main man for Newcastle, and he could be a really good option to consider. And he's always, I'd say, low owned, and he's not really, let's say, a fancy pick, but he could do the goods. Just a bit concerned about the injuries, and also Newcastle in general, who can be very unreliable. I remember getting Callum Wilson, for example, against Sheffield United last year, and Newcastle were just absolutely awful. So that's just something to consider. Of course, they do have a new manager now. Let's wait and see how they do. But let me know what you would change. Of course, there are different options you can go for, despite, obviously offering quite a lot of alternatives already. But still, there are so many different options in FPL this season. But in terms of the best wildcard team, I think a few players are just non-negotiables. Be sure to have Mohamed Salah. Be sure to have a Chelsea defender, a City defender, and maybe I'd say a cheap goalkeeper like Ramsdale or Raya. Sanchez is also pretty good as well. And maybe a Brentford defender, if not Mbeumo, and of course Ivan Toney up front. And Antonio, I think, is still the best, around the £7 to £8 million striker. And Heung-min Son, of course, Jamie Vardy. We've got so many different options, but be sure to have, I'd say, most of those that I've just listed there. And once again, like I said, if you haven't already, smash the like button and subscribe if you're new, especially if you found this useful or entertaining. And very much appreciate all the feedback of the last few live streams and videos. Thank you so much to all the new channel members. Very much appreciated. And same with all the super chats. Obviously, you don't have to, but it's very much appreciated nonetheless. And good luck with Game Week 10, and good luck with the rest of the season. Same with UCL Fantasy. And obviously, enjoy the football. Try not to let any bad results or bad scores influence your mood too much. Obviously, remember, it's just a game. Try to enjoy it as much as you can. And I'll see you next time.